Hi, my name is Sarah. This is for my Biology 201 class. This is the final project on my system analysis. For the first slide, we just talk a little bit about the nervous system. The nervous system is typically defined as an organ system that coordinates the activities of muscles, monitors organs, constructs and processes data received from the senses and it initiates actions. The nervous system essentially has control over the whole body's activities and the reactions that the body and the muscles in the body has to stimuli, impulses, and things of that matter. The nervous system has a complex network of nerves and cells that carries messages to and from the brain and the spinal cord to other muscles in the body. So essentially, that just means that the nervous system receives input from other organs and sends messages to the muscles, to the brain, and then in the brain, it will come up with some sort of response to the impulse, and it would send that response to the muscles in the body. The nervous system is made up of all of the nerve cells in our body. We communicate with the outside world through our senses and our nervous system. The nervous system consists of 4 different types of nerves: cranial nerves, central nerves, peripheral nerves, and autonomic nerves. The brain is located within the central nervous system, as we all know. The brain does weigh approximately 3 pounds. There's not a ton of research that is pretty consistent with how much it actually weighs. It kind of depends. It consists of 4 principal parts: the brainstem, the cerebellum, and the diaphysium. Within the brain, there are 2 types of matter, white and gray, as we should all know. Gray matter consists of cell bodies, neurons, and neuralgia. White matter carries impulses to and from the gray matter. White matter consists of nerve fibers, otherwise known as axons. Within the brain, it is split right down the middle into 2 hemispheres. These 2 hemispheres are called the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. The brain is divided also into 4 different lobes: the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. The brain is made up of central nerves. The frontal lobe is associated with reasoning, planning, parts of speech, movement, emotions, and problem solving. The parietal lobe is associated with movement as well, orientation, recognition, and stimuli. The occipital lobe is associated with visual processing, so eyesight, things like that. The temporal lobe is associated with perception, recognition of auditory, memory, and speech. The brain itself would be located both superior and medial within the human body. It is located within the cranial cavity. It's located superior and medial. The 6 main parts of the brain: the cerebellum, the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, occipital lobe, parietal lobe, and the brainstem. The brainstem is located medially within the human body. The cerebellum located more dorsal, somewhat inferior to the brainstem. The frontal lobe is the most anterior part of the brain and is superficial to the forehead. The temporal lobe is lateral to the brainstem and superior to one's ears. The occipital lobe is the most posterior part of the brain and it is located most dorsal to the lobes. The parietal lobe is superior to the occipital lobe, but posterior to the frontal lobe. And the brain lies above the body's transverse line. And it looks like it is covered in hills and valleys. It's got these weird kind of marks in it, I guess you could say. Cells within the brain. It is estimated that the human brain has about 100 billion neurons. The main cell types within the central nervous system and the human brain are neurons and glial cells. The neurons consist of three main parts. The bulbous part of the neuron is called the soma. From the soma, there is one axon. The soma is also covered in dendrites. Neurons are unbelievably outnumbered by glial cells in the nervous system, which is kind of weird, but there are three different types of glial cells that have been identified within the brain. These cells are responsible for biochemical support of neurons and other cell types, support of endothelial cells. These ones form the blood-brain barrier. A major role in the repair and scarring process of the brain and spinal cord are following mechanical injuries. These cells types are also a guidance for growing neurons during the development of the brain. The oligodendrites are responsible for surrounding the cell's processes and axons of the nerves and isolating from the environment. The microglia cells are only found in the central nervous system. It is not found in any other system in the body. Once those cells are activated by a physical injury, elevated levels of pro-inflammatory or neuroinflammatory diseases, it will assume an amboid and display a behavior similar to phagocytic and cytotoxic cells of the immune system. The neuron in the basic unit in the nervous system. It is a specialized conductor cell that receives and transmits electrochemical nerve impulses. A typical neuron has a cell body and long arms that conduct impulses from one body part to another body part. That is a quote from Mandel. The brain consists of connective tissue and nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is responsible for rapid, long-distance signaling, coordination, and thinking. Nervous tissue consists of highly specialized nerve cells and support cells, which are derived from embryonic neuroectoderm and neural crest. The blood vessels within the brain and the connective tissue associated with these blood vessels are called stroma, which we previously talked about. The functions of the brain is separated into four different lobes. Within these lobes there is the cerebrum, the cerebellum, the brainstem, the pituitary gland, and the hypothalamus. The cerebrum is the thinking part of the brain. It is also the biggest part of the brain. This part of the brain controls the voluntary muscles within the body. The cerebellum is only 1/8 of the brain's size. It controls balance, movement, and coordination. The brainstem is important because it connects the rest of the brain to the spinal cord. It controls functions to keep your body alive. Examples are breathing, digesting food, circulating blood, and things of that matter. The brainstem also controls involuntary movements. The pituitary gland produces and releases hormones to your body and helps with growth and puberty. The hypothalamus is the brain's inner thermostat. So this is the part of the body that controls the body's temperature so that we're not either too hot or too cold. How homeostasis is maintained within the brain. Glial cells play a major role in this. They are the ones that regulate the ambient concentration of the synaptic neurotransmitters. The brain's hypothalamus helps to maintain homeostasis in terms of body's temperature, like we previously spoke about. So the hypothalamus senses when the body is too hot, and it sends signals to the sweat glands to make you sweat and cool off. The hypothalamus senses that the body is too cold as well, and sends other signals to the muscles of the body to make you shiver and hopes to create warmth from the movement. The hypothalamus also controls the body's hormones. These hormones are released when a person is feeling stressed in order to try to relieve that stress or reduce that stress. There are other hormones that are released in order to regulate blood pressure. This is the same The hypothalamus is the same thing that actually helps with puberty and things like that as well, and growth within the human body. If the hypothalamus did not release impulses to make the body shiver or sweat, the body temperature would not be able to survive. The body would not be able to survive in regular everyday life. So if we were too hot all the time, or if we were too cold all the time, it would just make life really, really uncomfortable. The hypothalamus, if that did not release hormones for puberty and other things such as blood pressure, again, the body would have lots of uncomfortable moments. If homeostasis is not maintained within the brain, there could be problems that may cause just things like diseases, disorders, things like that. There are some diseases that affect the brain: Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, seizures, brain tumors, Pick's disease, and ALS. A lot of people know ALS from the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, essentially because this is the disease that kind of freezes up your nerves and your muscles within your body. It makes it really hard to move, do anything by yourself. A lot of these are really common diseases and really common things that happen. Alzheimer's and dementia are kind of alike. They've got a lot to do with forgetting things and not having a lot of cognitive function. Parkinson's is nerves in the central area of the brain that degenerate slowly, causing problems with movement and coordination. Huntington's disease is actually inherited, so it's a nerve disorder that causes degeneration of brain cells, which in turn makes it hard to do things and can cause mood swings, depression, sometimes even irritability. Seizures are caused by excessive electrical activity in the brain, causing recurrent seizures. Seizures can be dangerous because they can be very painful for people. Brain tumors, sometimes otherwise known as cancer. Sometimes they're cancerous, sometimes they're not. Pick's disease is a nerve at the front and side of the brain. Pick's disease is a disease that affects the nerves at the front and the side of the brain. They're destroyed due to a buildup of abnormal protein within the brain. ALS, again, we already talked about that. Parkinson's disease is the disease that can cause tremors in the hands, stiffness of the limbs, slowness of movement, and unstable posture. Huntington's disease can cause mood swings, depression, and irritability. Alzheimer's and dementia, loss of memory, mental functions, lots of changes in behavior. Personality seems to change. Also, thinking skills is a little bit difficult. Seizures, this disease can cause head injuries. It is dangerous. Brain tumors, like we talked about, aren't always cancerous, but can be, which could be fatal. Pick's disease can cause inappropriate behavior, difficulty with speech, loss of memory, and intellectual ability. ALS can cause paralysis. Sometimes ALS can even cause inability to breathe. Sometimes people do need assistance with that. There are some conditions that can affect the brain. A headache, some headaches can be serious, but otherwise they can be treated with simple things like ibuprofen, acetaminophen, things like that. Headaches are pretty typical. Strokes are another condition. They're caused by a lack of blood flow and oxygen to a specific area of the brain. Eventually, that area's brain tissue will die if it's left with less blood flow and less oxygen for a certain amount of time. A brain aneurysm can be caused by an artery in the brain developing a weak area that swells. Traumatic brain injuries, so things like car accidents, can cause this. Hitting your head too hard. Sports can cause this. And to kind of go along with the traumatic brain injuries is a concussion. It's caused by a major force exerted on the head, causing the brain to move around. Again, car accidents, sports, being pushed, things like that. Changes that can happen to the brain because of these conditions. A lot of times these can cause irritability. Brain aneurysms can actually cause strokes, which have, of course, their own risk factors. Um, Traumatic brain injuries and concussions can cause a lot of pain, lots of irritability, disturbance in the brain function, things like that. And then the last slide is just all of my references. Thank you.